Hi, my name is Nicole. Welcome to my channel, Travel to Money. In this video, I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, long-term travel, and share with you some of the lessons I've learned. We'll cover the great stuff and the hard stuff, and will hopefully better prepare you if you are considering the life of a digital nomad. If you are new here, I have created this channel to help you learn about how to travel, adventure, and have fun on the road to financial independence. I have traveled the world, I own a couple of houses in Spain, and I'm on a creative journey to financial freedom. I believe the road to financial freedom can and should be fun. I hope you'll subscribe and join me on this journey no matter where you are starting from. When I was 21 years old, I went on my first trip to Europe with 7 friends and coworkers from Florida. We went on a 10-day trip to Paris, and it all happened relatively quickly. The funny thing is that my roommate and I were supposed to be flying to Texas to see our families, but when our friend's mom, who was a travel agent, looked at flights to Texas for us, she called her daughter back and said, "It's cheaper for you to fly to Paris than it is for you to fly to Texas." And thanks to that steal of a deal, a few weeks later, we landed in Paris. At that point in my life, I had never thought about travel. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and thought I would live there the rest of my life. Now I found myself living in Florida, and I was still adjusting to being away from home. I hadn't learned yet that home would take on different meanings over time. And now I'm standing in this incredible city in France, and I just couldn't pick my jaw up off the floor. There was one day when some of our group wanted to go to a specific place, but I wanted to see Notre Dame, so I went by myself to explore this stunning cathedral. And I think this may have been the start of something that resonates in my soul. I tend to be a people person, and I always want someone else to be there, but there are gifts that travel has given me when I explore alone. Sometimes being present isn't always about being present with other people. It's about being present with yourself and with that special moment of experiencing the beauty of the world around you. Even if you're traveling with another person, take some time to explore alone and learn to be present with yourself. Paris unlocked a desire for travel in my heart, as I'm sure it has for many other people. Charles Dickens said, "What an immense impression Paris made upon me. It is the most extraordinary place in the world." I would have to agree with that, but for me, it made me long for everything I hadn't seen. Knowing that Paris had been there for the first 20 years of my life and I had never seen it made me wonder what else was out there. At the time, I swore I would go back to Paris every year, but more than a decade passed with me living paycheck to paycheck for a lot of that time and just being consumed by the monotony of life around me. I was one of those people as a kid who always thought I'd get married and have 5 or 6 kids. For years, I was sort of prioritizing that desire, maybe subconsciously, which makes no sense because there was never a point at any time where I was even close to that becoming a reality. I'll never forget this one moment. I was 36 years old. I had purchased my first house in Florida. I had all the things I wanted, and life was good, but I had never really stopped to ask myself what I really wanted. I always just did life the way everyone else was doing it. And as I sat there, I asked myself, maybe for the first time, what do you want? And it hit me like a lightning bolt. I want to travel. It only took like 60 seconds. It was like this unfulfilled longing that I had never really taken the time to identify, but it was so clear. And that moment, as short as it was, changed everything. Which brings me to my next point, which is if you really want to consider long-term travel, you absolutely can do it, but you have to make it a priority. Something like becoming a digital nomad or taking a gap year from school or work, they don't typically happen out of nowhere. It happens because you make it a focus and you don't take your eye off of the ball. Which brings me to the next phase of long-term travel, which is the planning phase. And there is a very profound truth that I want to share with you. Almost always, the planning and dreaming of travel are far more glorious than the travel itself. Once I decided that I wanted to travel, talked to my boss about me doing my work from Europe, and put a date on the calendar, I spent the next 7 months of my life planning. In truth, long-term travel doesn't require that much planning, but this was my first round, and over planning was the name of the game. I actually believe that my travel itself suffered a little from my over planning. However, that 7 months that I spent planning and dreaming about my upcoming journey were some of the most fun months of my life. Now, if you're someone who is always dwelling on a worst case scenario, this part might not be as much fun for you, but my personality type is ENFP or Enneagram 7 if you're familiar with that, and I tend to only imagine the best case scenario. That's why dreaming about it all was so much fun. Do try if you can to enjoy the planning phase. The next thing that I learned about long term travel was that I would have to process joy and grief all at the same time. It all hit me in the 24 hours before my trip. I had been so focused on dreaming about my adventures that I forgot about what I'd be leaving behind. Obviously, this will look a bit different for each person, but for me, there was a 7-year-old little boy who was like a godson to me and one of the greatest joys of my life. I remember telling him that I was going to be traveling the world for a while. He asked me why I had to go. Was my job sending me? It's like he was looking for a reason and not wanting to process the fact that I was choosing to go, that I was choosing to live life for a while in a place that would be away from him. And this was the hardest thing of all. He and his family drove me to the airport on the night I was leaving. I was taking off for an overnight stop in DC. I hugged him goodbye with tears streaming down my face, and I cried all the way to DC. His mom didn't tell me for a few days just how hard he cried when they drove away. I wasn't prepared for this. To go somewhere new means to give up what you're leaving behind, and that is a tension that doesn't really ever go away. The first month and a half of my travels were very rough. I had a condition in my right eye called coronary uveitis. I lost about 90% of the vision in my right eye, had extreme pain when there was any light at all, and my eye was blood red. This is a condition caused by something else wrong in your body, likely the fact that I had just had the flu. I went from France to Italy without the use of my right eye, got to this tiny little town in Italy that was far more isolating than I could have imagined, and ended up having a horrible back spasm. I was lying on the floor, unable to move for a while, just wondering if this was worth it. A couple of days later, I had a chat with my boss, who is the kind of boss that really cares, and he gave me a piece of advice that I think I'll always carry with me. He said, "Nicole, if you need to come home, come home. Don't feel like you need to make some big decision about whether or not to travel. It's okay to just come home, get healthy, and reset." I think sometimes we can be so committed to a plan that we've made that we won't give it an honest evaluation in the moment. I decided not to go home at that point, but I did fly to the UK a couple of weeks later to see some of my closest friends for a few days, which really refreshed me emotionally. I'm glad that I stuck it out, but thanks to those words from my boss, I learned to be flexible with myself and my plans. I went to Greece and Spain afterward. My health improved, and so did the weather. Things were turning around. I had a trip to Dubai and Iraq planned. After Iraq, I was supposed to go to Montenegro, but I was feeling homesick and really wanted to hug my people. So I decided that after Iraq, I would head back home and cancel my stay in Montenegro. And there aren't a lot of things that I allow myself to regret, but I do sort of regret that decision. When I got home, that first 24 hours was sweet. It was so good to see my people and hug them tightly. But then, less than a day after arriving back home, I wished that I was traveling again. I realized that everything at home was the same monotonous routine that I had wanted to get away from, and this tension always remains. When you're traveling, you may miss home, even long for it at times. And when you're home, you may miss traveling and long for it too. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Enneagram form of personality typing, but I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, and there's a guy who wrote songs for the different types. There are a couple of lines that he writes about sevens that resonate so deeply with me, and maybe they will with you too. The first I want to mention says, "It costs farewell tears for a welcome home parade." I feel that tension in such a real way. The last verse of the song says, "Let me tell you another secret of the trade. It feels like sinking when I'm standing in one place. So I look to the future and book another flight. When everything feels heavy, I've learned to travel light. But I want to be here, truly be here, to watch the ones that I love bloom." And it's like he gets it. He gets the tension. When I first heard that song, I probably listened to it on repeat 100 times. He articulated the very ways in which I feel the need to be everywhere else and the deep need to be right here with the people I love. And I've finally come to realize what beauty there is in this tension, what joy to have life where I can have these two great loves, always having a beautiful thing at my fingertips while longing deeply for the other. How blessed. So, my advice is to have no regrets. When you want to travel, travel. When you want to be home, be home. If you have the option to choose, then you, like me, have an awful lot to be thankful for. I'd love to know if any of this resonates with you. Oh, and remember that sweet 7-year-old boy I told you about? Well, he's 14 now and asking me when we can go to France. I think one day my worlds will collide, and I absolutely can't wait. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.